Salutations! Welcome to a new series on this channel, where we will be exploring arguments and debates regarding different belief systems relative to Platonic philosophy, with an eye to the excising of stupid opinions.
All mockery of Jews and their one God shall be kept to an appropriate minimum.
Before we begin, for the sake of anyone who would feel personally attacked by a criticism of their beliefs, I would like to quote the translator of today's subject matter, Mr. Thomas Taylor. As an apology for certain strong expressions both in the fragments and accompanying notes, suffice it to say that false opinions in things of the greatest consequence cannot be too forcibly reprobated, and that those who are offended by such expressions are such as will never be purified from the errors they are intended to expose. Now for the topic at hand. Emperor Julian was a Platonic philosopher, governor of Western Rome, and was Roman emperor for about 3 years before his death in battle. He was the last heathen emperor of the Romans. Among his philosophical essays, Julian wrote a treatise entitled Against the Galilæans, that is, the Christians, with the following intent. It appears to me to be proper that I should explain to all men the causes through which I am persuaded that the fraudulent machination of the Galilæans is the fiction of men, composed with an evil intention, and that it indeed possesses nothing divine, but employing that part of the soul which delights in the fabulous, which is puerile and stupid, adduces monstrous narrations in order to a belief of the truth. Obviously, the Christians destroyed every copy of the work in the centuries following Julian's death. The small fragments that are preserved come from an attempted refutation by this so-called Saint Cyril of Alexandria, the same Cyril whose henchmen murdered and mutilated the body of Hypatia. I have arranged the fragments according to subject matter rather than their original order, and used more modern versions of his Bible citations. Nonetheless, let us begin. It is, however, worthwhile briefly to relate whence and how the conception of divinity first arrived to us, afterwards to compare what is said by the Greeks and Hebrews of divinity, and in the next place to interrogate those who are neither Greeks nor Jews, but of the sect of the Galilæans, why they have preferred their own doctrine to ours, and still farther, why not adhering to the tenets of the Jews but departing from them, they have taken a peculiar road, assenting to nothing beautiful, nothing worthy neither among us Greeks, nor among the Hebrews derived from Moses, but collecting from both nations what is pernicious, impiety indeed from the Judaic craft, but a depraved and dissolute life from our Greek indolence and confusion, they think proper to denominate this the most excellent worship of divinity. First, Julian compares Genesis 1 to Plato's Timaeus. The emperor immediately notices something that a modern reader with a better knowledge of the Bible's history might also find noteworthy. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. In this account of the creation, Moses neither says that the abyss was made by God, nor the darkness, nor the water, though it was certainly requisite that he who said of the light that it was produced by the command of God, ought also to have said this of the night, of the abyss, and of the water. Moses, however, says nothing about the fabrication of them, though they are frequently mentioned by him. The primordial cosmic ocean, or chaos, Tehom in Hebrew, precedes the creation. This is the case in the older Mesopotamian mythology, from which significant parts of the Bible are ultimately derived, in which the chaos ocean Tiamat, which is cognate to Tehom, exists before the gods are manifested. The Egyptians also conceived of Nun, the watery abyss, as the first material thing to exist before the gods arose and shaped the cosmos. By water is understood material nature. The Egyptians, says Simplicius, called matter, which they symbolically denominated water, the dregs or sediment of the first life, matter being, as it were, a certain mire or mud. So Genesis 1, being derived from ancient Semitic mythology, assigns the abyss Tehom a primary existence, which Yahweh divides into the waters above and the waters below to make the cosmos. In the Mesopotamian myths, Tiamat is killed and split in half by the sky god, who puts one half above and one below to form the cosmos.
I think they used our likenesses. Can we sue?
Besides this, Neither does he make mention of the generation or creation of angels, nor of the manner in which they were produced, but alone speaks of the bodies which are contained in the heaven and the earth, so that God, according to Moses, is the fabricator of nothing incorporeal, but is the adorner of the subject matter of the universe. Julian here shows that Genesis makes Yahweh to be the shaper of physical matter, having no part in anything prior to that. This is a secondary corporeal demiurgic power, inferior to a properly intellectual god. Further, he makes mankind from the earth by his own hand. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." By contrast, the Demiurge of the Timaeus is of a primary intelligible nature, designating natural powers to the formation of physical things. And now listen to my instructions. 3 tribes of mortal beings remain to be created. Without them the universe will be incomplete, for it will not contain every kind of animal which it ought to contain, if it is to be perfect. On the other hand, if they were created by me and received life at my hands, they would be on equality with the gods. In order then that they may be mortal, and that this universe may be truly universal, do ye, according to your natures, betake yourselves to the formation of animals, imitating the power which was shown by me in creating you. The part of them worthy of the name immortal, which is called divine and is the guiding principle of those who are willing to follow justice, and you. Of that divine part I will myself sow the seed, and having made a beginning, I will hand the work over to you. And do ye then interweave the mortal with the immortal, and make and beget living creatures, and give them food, and make them grow, and receive them again in death. Whether or not this is a dream, learn by understanding it. Plato denominates gods those apparent natures the sun and moon, the stars, that is the planets, and the heaven. These, however, are the images of the unapparent gods. The sun, which is visible to the eyes, of the intelligible and unapparent sun, and again, the moon which is apparent to our eyes, and each of the stars are images of intelligibles. Julian tells us that the children of gods whom the Demiurge commands are the apparent gods, the natural powers. Corporeal things must have their origin in the apparent powers of nature, because if they came from the same source as divine and immortal things, they would be divine and immortal. Media must necessarily fill the gulf between the two extremes. The modern viewer, having knowledge of Darwinian evolution, will certainly see that Plato's account corresponds harmoniously to modern science, while Genesis does not. Compare with these the Judaical doctrine, the paradise planted by God, and Adam fashioned by him, and afterwards the woman created for Adam, for God said, "I will make an helpmeet for him." She was not, however, a helpmeet to him in anything, but was deceived, and became the cause both to him and herself of being expelled from the delicacies of paradise. For these things are perfectly fabulous, since how is it reasonable to suppose that God was ignorant that the woman, who was made as a helpmeet for Adam, would rather be pernicious than beneficial to him? And to the serpent that discoursed with Eve, what kind of language shall we say it used? And in what do things of this kind differ from the fables devised by the Greeks? It is indeed the case that the Christians assert that their Bible is unique in its divine inspiration, being the word of God Almighty, and Julian is very right in saying that with its talking animals and other things to be seen later, it is not different from any other ancient mythology one can find.
Can you do better? Probably.
Is it not also excessively absurd that God should forbid man fashioned by himself the knowledge of good and evil? For what can be more foolish than one who is not able to know what is good and what is depraved? For it is evident that such a one will not avoid some things, I mean evils, and that he will not pursue others, viz. Such as are good. But, as the summit of all, God forbade man to taste of wisdom, than which nothing is more honourable to man. For that the knowledge of good and evil is the proper work of wisdom, is evident even to the stupid. Hence the serpent was rather the benefactor, and not the destroyer of the human race. How was Adam supposed to know that disobeying God is wrong without having knowledge of good and evil? If we're to take the story seriously, then Adam is entirely blameless, while Yahweh is malicious as well as stupid and ignorant, since he believed that Eve would be helpful, and later the mortals are hidden from him in the undergrowth. Unless, of course, the Christians are to concede that this is a myth of the same kind found among the Greeks, Egyptians, and Babylonians. Julian also points to the Tower of Babel, and compares it to the story we hear from Homer, in which the Aloidae attempted to reach heaven by stacking up 3 mountains. For I say that the one is in a like manner fabulous with the other. But by the gods, why do you who admit the former reject the fable of Homer? Julian further points out that even if you turned the entire planet into bricks for the tower, you would not reach the stars, let alone the immaterial heaven, so God had no real reason to confuse the speech of the builders. And yet, so many years after Julian, there are men who have gone into space and set foot on the moon, and God has not seen fit to confound the language of the Americans. Each of these narrations, therefore, unless it is a fable containing an arcane theory, which I should think is the case, is full of much blasphemy towards divinity. Julian talks about the covenant established between Yahweh and the Hebrews. Moses says that the Demiurge of the world selected the nation of the Hebrews, paid attention to and was careful of them alone. But of other nations, he makes no mention whatever how or by what gods they are governed, unless someone should grant that he distributed to them the sun and moon. According to the Old Testament, Yahweh has sent throngs of prophets, saints, and innumerable miracles to Israel, parting rivers and seas, sending down manna from heaven, pillars of fire, and many other wonders. But never did he send any prophet anywhere else, to the heathens. This God would prefer that all the nations of the world besides Israel should worship idols, rather than that he should send them prophets and miracles to show them the truth. But he despised us for myriads, or if you had rather, for thousands of years, leaving all of us in such ignorance as you say, to worship idols. Us, who occupy the earth from the rising to the setting sun, and from the north to the south, except a small race of men, who not more than 2,000 years ago inhabited a corner of Palestine. For if he is the God of all of us, and in a similar manner the Demiurge of all things, why did he despise us? Why, also, is he a jealous God, punishing the sins of the fathers? This makes absolutely no sense from a monotheistic perspective. Billions of people have lived and died in perpetual ignorance of the one true God all over the world, while the Hebrews were exposed to miracles and prophecies that showed the might of the Lord. At any moment, God could have sent a prophet to anyone else, but for thousands and thousands of years he did nothing while they descended into hell in their millions. Again, therefore, attend to the assertions of our ancestors on this subject, for they say that the Demiurge is the common father and king of all things, and that to other nations he has distributed gods, who are the prefects of nations, and the curators of cities, each of which governs his own allotment in an appropriate manner. For since in the Father all things are perfect, and all things are one, but in the natures distributed from him, a different power has dominion in a different divinity, hence Mars presides over the warlike concerns of nations, Minerva over the same concerns in conjunction with wisdom, but Mercury over such as rather pertain to sagacity than bold undertakings. And thus the nations which are governed by the several divinities follow the essence of their presiding gods. This account of divinity is consistent with the observed reality of history. Every nation throughout most of history and all of the world has had its pantheon of gods and goddesses, most of whom are heavily localized and strongly adapted to the culture that venerates them. Even the Hebrews themselves were mostly polytheists until around 200 BC, according to modern experts, with monotheism being peculiar to the noble and priestly elites in Jerusalem around Solomon's temple. If the deity desired that all nations should worship him alone, he could send to them precisely the same prophets and miracles he sent to the Hebrews according to the Old Testament, and we would observe the elites among all the great empires of the ancient world giving praise to Yahweh alone. Instead, we see the opposite, in which case, either the heathen worship of many gods is pleasing to divinity, or divinity would rather see all those who lived and died before the arrival of missionaries undergo punishment for a crime they cannot even comprehend, than simply show them the proper way to worship. This latter proposition is insane and despicable. Next, we will look at the
15! 10!
commandments. Julian points out that, besides those that pertain specifically to his worship, there is no other nation upon the earth that does not prohibit all of these same things. Therefore, to ascribe these to divine insight is to make God an idiot who can only state the abundantly obvious. But the commandment, "Thou shalt not worship other gods," is calumniating divinity in a very high degree, for God is said to be a jealous God, and in another place to be a consuming fire. When a man, therefore, is jealous and envious, does he appear to you to deserve reprehension, and are to be considered as divinely inspired if God is said by you to be jealous? Though how is it reasonable to assert of God a thing which is so manifestly a lie? For envy and jealousy do not arrive even as far as to the most excellent men, so far are they from being present with angels and gods. But you are busily employed about partial powers, which he will not err who denominates diabolical, for among these powers there is ambition and vainglory, but in the gods there is nothing of this kind. If Yahweh is supposed to be jealous, and made angry when another god is worshipped, then he is worse than a virtuous human who is above jealousy, and therefore can be nothing more than a demon. By contrast, the Greek philosophers say this of the gods: they see many blessed sights in the inner heaven, and there are many ways to and fro, along which the blessed gods are passing, every one doing his own work, and he may follow who will and can, for jealousy has no place in the celestial choir. For after he who was initiated by Belphegor, and who had slain with his own hand the woman by whom he had been inveigled, with a shameful and most deplorable wound in the belly, God is made to say, "Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, hath turned my wrath away from the children of Israel, while he was zealous for my sake among them, that I consumed not the children of Israel in my jealousy." What can be more trifling than the cause for which God is falsely made to be angry by the writer of these things? What can be more absurd? Why does Yahweh continuously punish people for crimes committed by other people? What crime had the firstborn sons of Egypt committed? What of the small children of Sodom and Gomorrah? What about all those faithful people who were the family of Job, and Job himself? How can it possibly be that every single human upon the face of the earth before the deluge, save for Noah's family, deserved to be drowned, when even today, of which we agree is the worst of all times, even the atheists are not generally evil? And what about the Pharaoh of Egypt, who was willing to allow the Hebrews to go free when Yahweh came down and forcibly changed his mind? These are not the actions of a god, they are the actions of an evil demon, unless the Christians are to relinquish their claim that the Bible is distinct from other mythology, and thereby relinquish their claim to divine inspiration. In the next of these videos, the Emperor will move on from the behaviour of Yahweh to the behaviour of his followers. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.